Hello and welcome to today's American Society of Association Executives Lunch Learning Series. Today's session is Form versus Function, Assessing Your Email Templates. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Chief Marketing Officer for HighRoad Solutions, Suzanne Carowin. Suzanne, if you're ready, the floor is all yours.
All right, thanks, Trevor. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. This is going to be a really, I consider myself a very practical, pragmatic marketer, and this is going to be a very practical, pragmatic, let's get into it kind of session. I do want to say, so I don't forget largely, that we do have kind of a corollary slide deck and also recorded webinar. So we'll go ahead, if you want to, on the Q&A afterwards, if you want to either leave your name or if you want to say, yes, I do want to be contacted after this, we'll go ahead and send you, or you can always contact me at the end. And I say that because the corollary webinar, I didn't want to do a repeat, and many people are joint participants between our Asae Lunch Learning and our HighRoad U webinar series that we hold every Friday. And the other webinar deck has a ton, on and on and on about examples. And we did an entire month's worth of really delving into email best practices, design best practices, ideas for it, subject line, etc. So I wanted to just alert everybody. Maybe I can also send that over, and everybody can share in that one as well. So we want to build on that, because today what I want to focus in on is a little bit not so down in the weeds on the email templates, but we're going to get to that as well. But what we wanted to do was step back and give everyone, disclose this framework and this methodology that we have. We've really trademarked here at HighRoad Solution about how we go about doing assessments with our clients and our Asae, other member companies and member organizations. So us being the endorsed e-marketing provider and to both Asae and also as a business partner to Asae, we think it's important that we kind of go through and tell you, not just so theoretically, a lot of times we just talk about practice, but let's get down into what we've actually done and give you a real sense of how important this form versus function conversation is about assessing your email templates. And I would extrapolate today to say even further, really assessing your email portfolio. Now, email portfolio is not a common term that you hear a lot in the association industry. And I think it's largely because email has always been so tactically driven in our industry, and we're always into the how-to, and we're always into the weeds of the what, and we're always not stepping back and taking that moment to say, wait a minute, we need to step back and strategically assess what it is we're doing in using email as a channel. Right? Email is a channel of communication. We're so used to using it, and we're so quick on the trigger of that send button, and we're also operationally oriented and overwhelmed that many organizations just have gotten to this point where they say, hold on a second, you know what, we need a little bit stop the madness for a moment, and there's something that's happening, and there's a huge digital transformation craze that's happening throughout the association industry. It's time for us to stop for a second, get strategic, stop sending email for 1 second, stand back and say, okay, let's assess this thing at the email portfolio level. Okay, overall, if we step back and I aggregate everything I'm doing, how is our association using email, and what can we do better? And there's an overwhelming understanding that email is not going anywhere. Email is even more important in many cases. But it's different, and that's kind of the bottom line. So many organizations have not really looked at their email portfolio in maybe ever or 10 years, but they're pretty much doing the same thing they've been doing 5, 6 years ago, if not 10 years ago, if not 15 years ago, if not 16 years ago, and most of us started really getting into email around 2000. So this is kind of what organizations are now coming to us at HighRoad, and just like Asae did, to say, hey, can you help us understand what it is we're doing and how can we improve? And that's what we want to talk about today. So that's form versus function. And we want to step back and talk about the methodology we use. So let's just get into it. So before we can go immediately and say, oh, here, look, we could just say, hey, here's a bunch of best practices. Here's a bunch of things you can do. Use subject line emoticons. Use this, that. Sure, those are all great ideas. They're all best practices for someone. But the question is, who's that someone? Okay, and they're no longer in digital business. Can you be in the R&D, the rip off and duplicate, and just because it's a great idea for this company or this for-profit or this nonprofit or this association, therefore you should use it for yourself? That's a very shallow approach. It's a very shallow approach. And what's happened is that as these channels have gotten more sophisticated, and more importantly, as the buyer has gotten more sophisticated, we need to get more sophisticated, which means we can't have these kind of like, these answers that we get are not simple, okay? They are sophisticated. We have sophisticated buyers. We have a lot of things at play, which means we need to understand from a more sophisticated standpoint what we need to do to make email continue to work for us and garner the benefits that we've received for many years, which is why we all love email. So in saying that, I'm saying we need to understand where you are at baseline. Okay, so we call it baseline. Number one, let's just take a snapshot. What are you doing today? What's working? What's not? What do you have in the arsenal? That's how we look at it. Don't tell me about, okay, I don't want to hear about open rates yet and click through. What are you doing? What are the email kind of types? And who are you using this for, and how is it working? Just reshaping the conversation to not be tactical right off the bat completely changes the nature of the conversation. And 9 times out of 10, somebody has to get somebody else in the room. Because a lot of times the email practitioner, the person who's sending out emails, is just doing so, just because they've been told to do that. On Tuesdays, you send the newsletter, etc. And what happens is as soon as you say, what are we trying to strategically use this for from a business standpoint, all of a sudden everybody's head snaps back and they go, we've got to get somebody else in the room. And it's a good one because it brings in all the program directors, right? It might bring the event people and the membership people and the publications people and the professional education people. And they come to the table because 2 big things have happened. One, we have to recognize that most people weren't taught how email actually works. And we just kind of think it works. We're like, oh, how hard can it be? And in the world of mobile, it's a different animal, completely different animal. And then 2, we have to understand that our email recipient base has changed. Their behavior has changed. The way we think about email, use email, consume email, that's changed, which fundamentally changes our design. It fundamentally changes form and function. Understanding our user and understanding our business purpose completely has now changed these things. So we can't have the right form and function if we don't now understand who we're actually trying to target to consume this, and then also, right, what are we trying to business-wise do with it, okay? Those now are what should be shaping your email portfolio conversation. So we come in and we understand what baseline. So what we say today is, okay, great. Having said that, now that we have kind of the people in the room, so we need both. You need the practitioner people that know, okay, we're sending out, 100,000 emails a month or whatever it might be. You need those people, but then you also need overall at the aggregate level to start having a business conversation. Email is a business conversation, and most of us don't think of email that way. We're already down in the tactical, like if we change the color, will that make a difference? But that's not the conversation. The conversation is how are you correctly or incorrectly using the channel, the digital channel of email to drive revenue. And that's typically what we're trying to do. With emails, we come at the end of the day. And then the question is, okay, who are the experts that know how to do that? Who on staff know expert-wise how to use digital to drive behavior and to drive revenue, to drive the desired behavior that we want? Okay, and so typically that becomes HighRoad. That's where we fit in because that's our area of expertise, because that typically is not sitting on staff. So what we do is, I'm going to give you again our methodology. We say, look, let's break it down for you. We'll make it easier. And this is a way that I wanted to showcase because this is how we think about your email portfolio. And most organizations have never sat back to say, oh my goodness, on the whole, right? Like if somebody's just trying to, hey, do you want to sell a block email? You're like regular just email provider. They're just trying to sell software and commoditized email messaging, right? They're just like, what number do you want? That's not what we want to know because that's not going to get the business further. What we want to know is what are you using it for? And then how can we strategically better each kind of segment of what you're sending it for? And here's what I mean by that. This is a typical email association, a typical association email portfolio. So if we just look at some of the component parts here, what we do is we say, look, let's talk about the big chunks. If I had to look at your email, let's roll it up to say, where do the big chunks of email time and effort and really volume, where do they fall out? The reason you want to break this out is because these chunks correlate to two very important things that drive business success. It correlates to the amount of time that is spent trying to, if you want to think of it as cost of goods sold, the amount of time invested to be able to move your products and services out to your market. And secondly, it correlates to revenue. It correlates to actually the end product of what you're trying to get back, the end sale of it. Okay? So we break it out like this because we're trying to, again, understand how we can use email as a channel to effectively create top-line growth or to create bottom-line efficiency. Okay? And hopefully see all of the above. So if you look at it this way, this would be a typical association email portfolio. If I look at all the consulting I've done and I break it out, this is kind of typically how it falls out. There's a huge chunk for our annual event, and then there's kind of another large chunk for like all the other kind of miscellaneous event marketing you do, the regional seminars, the webinars, all that type of stuff. There's a big chunk that's usually for online education or certification or that type of product kind of sales. There's a chunk that happens for both membership acquisition, which is usually not very much, and that's where, again, that's a big growth area where a lot of associations are saying, how do I grow in digital? And email has a component in there. And then there's a larger chunk for, of course, for the membership renewal, and there's a big piece usually for what I'm going to call membership loyalty or membership benefits, typically translated into your email newsletter. That's kind of your content publication piece that you have been positioning for years as this is the benefit of membership of getting this email newsletter. And that's kind of typically how it breaks down. So even right there, that's a good self-check point to say, hey, if we haven't thought about our portfolio, let's think about it this way. You can do that by, hopefully in your system, you can tag it, and you can say it falls into this bucket, and you can start doing some analysis over time on that. Or you can just kind of aggregate it and eyeball it and list out, okay, let me look at all the, how can I categorize all the titles and subject lines for some period of time. All right, here are some things you probably then also didn't think about that we take into account. In the traditional email approach, there's really kind of two types of email. Like if you're really hardcore into the email world, you start differentiating between promotional email and transactional email, okay? And so you start thinking about email, again, comprehensively. You think about it as a channel, not splitting out, because it's a touch point. So you have to look at all of your digital touch points to your, your non-member and member base, let's say. So if I look comprehensively at my email portfolio, I'm going to realize that there really are two types of email, and I cannot forget these. And actually, there's more than two types, but let's just say two types that you have total control over. There's email that's your promotional email, which is I create the email and I send it out, right? I'm manually in my team sending out these emails. This is what we all consider like just our regular email marketing piece of it. Then we have transactional emails. And transactional emails for most organizations are really broken down into e-commerce receipts, right? Kind of the automated, forgot my password lookup types of emails, right? And then there's kind of some other pieces there that you might have. A lot of times, I'll give you an example. Your association management system might be automatically handling the renewal emails for you, and they're just getting kicked out on a process, okay? The issue with, now right there you can see the problem, right? Let me back up one. You can see promotional email, massive chunk, transactional email, much smaller chunk. And the little transactional area is one of those that associations by large have not been thinking about. They haven't been thinking about what could this really be. Now, if we worked in the for-profit world and we sold through e-commerce, we would be all over the e-commerce receipting piece. But somehow we haven't caught up there, but now associations are saying, you know what, we can do a lot more on the transactional email side. What's the most likely time that someone is going to open their email? What kind of emails get the highest open rates ever? E-commerce receipts. Why? It's as close as I can be to like being at point of purchase. I just spent money on my credit card. I want to look to make sure that I'm getting a receipt, that everything is fine. I need that reassurance. The email comes in. What's therefore the best time, possible time somebody just purchased? When should I be doing my cross-sell, upsell, couponing, discounting, further incentive, further engagement, further interactive, people like you, did you know? You could also get types of offerings right then. So transactional email and this e-commerce piece of it is something that we're doing a lot more work in now because it makes so much sense if you're thinking about it from the twofold piece, buyer behavior and driving revenue, okay? These are two pieces that you can actually get in. You can do more stuff with your association management system in terms of its receipting. It has great insights into it. We can use it into our behavioral data models. We can do all sorts of stuff there, and it gets right into the heart of the business aspect of our email, our email portfolio. All right, so then skipping back to the transactional email portfolio and just the last couple of comments on that, that same idea is the case on membership renewal. Why are you letting the association management system's default email be the interface point for someone who's making the decision whether to renew, right? Maybe it has your logo kind of half stuck in there, but what an incredible waste of an opportunity of a touch point when you could have this completely hyper-personalized email that's about them, that has all of their own data, that maybe also says, in one nutshell, here's all the benefits you've enjoyed or didn't enjoy in the last year of your membership, right? Here's all the money that being part of this trade organization saved you. Here's the laws that we were able to pass on your behalf. Any of those types of scenarios are certainly possible. It's just that it's a different approach to email. So that's the type of work that we're really working on now to say, look, we're trying to drive the right behavior to the right people, right, for the right revenue response. In order to do that, we need to be able to look at these pieces and get in there and start to redesign them. And that's kind of the next piece of what we're going to talk about. So as a self-check point, here's the way I just took the same behind the scenes, the data that's driving this pie chart, and gave you an example and gave you a little spreadsheet that you yourself can fill out to help you do this same analysis. So start listing out your email type, put your percentage of overall of your total volume of send of email. If you're not aware of it, somebody on staff has that. Whoever purchases your email block, they should know it, like this is the volume. Start to say that. Start to see, okay, here's how we're going to allocate it. And then start putting together the time, whether you look at that by, like, I'm putting in the hours here for, excuse me, this is from one of our clients. This is on a monthly basis of time spent. You know, again, this is a little bit harder. It's going to be a little bit more of a fuzzy math with it. But it helps you to get into the mindset of we should start thinking of email in terms of this, okay? And that's kind of the important piece to be able to get that idea that we need to start thinking about email strategically. And also, what this does, by the way, if I can step back and I can start thinking about email portfolio from a strategic digital channel standpoint, the other thing it does is it might change up a lot of these false or at least you can ask, is the premise that we've been using true or false? And there's a lot of premises that go like this. We're scared of over-emailing our members, so we're only allowing this department to put in one email a month or something to that effect. Okay, that might be a false premise, and we need to be able to look at that because that can't be the deciding factor. What your staff can handle, what you think is right, that can't be the deciding factor anymore. It has to be based on user data, right? The way that we need to design that, how often, our recency, our frequency, is all based on the data, on what are we trying to drive, what are we actually getting in terms of revenue and response, okay? So this is a little kind of self-check exercise there. So let's keep going. So then what we say is, great, now we know how much we're trying to get clarity on how much of each type, like where's our big, really time sucks, and where's all of our energy going. Typically, again, hopefully your energy is going into the emails. You send more emails around the things that drive more revenue. There's usually that correlation. So we want to take that, and now we want to say, okay, great, how do we make that better? We know email works in driving sales. We know that. What we're now saying, we've got that down pat. Now we're in another era. We're in the era of optimization. How do we do the best job we can in selling through email, driving lift, right? How do we get lift is what it's called, L-I-F-T. How do we get that lift that we're looking for, and what are the factors that's going to be able to drive lift? That's when we get into these elements of changing up your email. Lift might be driven by better targeting. It might be driven by better offers. Maybe what you're trying to market is not marketable. Okay? It might be driven by better subject lines. It might be driven by different time of the day of the send. All of these are different factors of saying, okay, how can we analyze this and get the lift that we desire? So again, setting still back on baseline, before we get to that, what we're going to say is, okay, great. Now here we got, on slide 8, we got the numbers that we all know. What do we know in today's terms of performance? Okay? And this is usually where organizations are. So we meet them where they are. Okay, right now, here's what we know. We know we send gobs of email, we send this many a month, this many a year. Maybe we can get to the percentage breakdown. And of that then, what's our open, what's our click-through, what's our number of subscribers, how many people we're sending to, and how many people do we have that are unsubscribed? The key here is what we want to know is how can we tie that back to those segments, okay? And that's something where most people haven't done. For all of our annual event emails that we sent, what's that look like? And most of us are looking at a case-by-case, like I sent this email, here's what we got. Maybe we aggregated up to like one campaign. But being able to put that and say, okay, across year over year, for every annual meeting, entire run that we have of all those emails, how effective is it, right? And where are we getting the people and who are they and things like that? That's getting into optimization. But we know right now, okay, we're going to write down our opens, our click-throughs, our subscribes, and our unsubscribes. Okay. Now here we get to the, okay, let's move from, that's where we are at baseline. We established baseline. Here's what you're doing. We talked about your workflow practices, et cetera. Okay, now let's stop again. Don't jump already to, is it responsive, is it not, all these little tactical things that drive lift. Let's stop for a second and say, what are we trying to do? Okay, because that's our driver. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to drive revenue for registration? Are we trying to drive additional sell from people who have already previously bought? Right? What are we trying to do? Because what we're trying to do determines how we're going to, that determines the how. We can't know how to do it if we don't understand what we're trying to achieve, okay? So it's the business consultant. The business consultant is saying, okay, right? And it's not just a business consultant. You need a business consultant trained in marketing, not communication, in marketing. How do I do pricing, positioning, placement, right product? All of those things. That's what marketing is. But what are we trying to achieve from a business standpoint? Then we're going to start saying, great, let's then overlay how we're going to use digital to employ it. So we're going to identify what are we trying to achieve. And typically, and we get all like funky about this in the association world, but the bottom line is typically we're trying to drive revenue. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it could be engagement. That's usually your email newsletter, right? And really what you care about driving there is engagement. Aside from that, the rest of most of the email portfolio, if we really say to it, is revenue-driven. It's sales-driven. And yet we're not experts, and we don't have experts on staff about sales enablement. No surprise then, at HighRoad, we're doing a lot of work in the sales enablement. How do we actually sell through digital kind of work? So we also do, I don't want to say we do a huge amount on the content marketing side, on the email newsletter side as well, but we want to understand that. What are we trying to achieve? Is it engagement with the newsletter? Great, because that's going to dictate one strategy. Is it, product sales or program sales on the other side, and that has a different strategy. We're going to understand what do we want to achieve. And then what we're going to go is we're going to talk now and hit it head on disruption change management and say, what do we fear? Because we got to know that. If you don't know the blocking points of any strategy and you haven't thought that out ahead, that's called like some consultant gave you a plan and it's never going to get implemented. It's called like the road to someday leads to nowhere. Okay, so we have to be able to identify our blocking points. For most organizations, the fear of change and everything else, or the fear in the email, this is from an email perspective, our fear is that we're over-emailing our members. We're all so scared of that, which is why we get this artificial rules of like, I can only send once on a Tuesday. which may or may not have data supporting that. Because again, it's not our fear anymore that can dictate what we do. The only thing that matters is our target user, right? Our target user has to dictate the strategy. We must be user-centric, highly focused in on the targeted buyer, their buyer persona, their buyer journey. That's who matters. So the fact that like my board member has an opinion or like my VP of marketing, this is what she's always done, is irrelevant. Okay, because that's not what dictates the strategy. It's not about us, right? It's about the you. It's about the user. It's all the you. That's why everything we do at HighRoad is called HighRoad You. It's to remember it's about being user-centric focused. So we say, let's get it out there. What do we fear? Okay, look, we think we're over-emailing people. Okay, so we're scared about putting out a new email product. We are scared. We think we need to consolidate. Okay, we live in fear of opt-outs. We don't want anyone to unsubscribe, right? That's a fear in the association world. This is like our only lifeline to our members. So we have all sorts of conversations with like, how can I skirt canned spam? Can I use it through transactional? Or there's kind of a myth that if I use transactional email, I don't have to have any sort of unsubscribe or any sort of language. That's a myth. So we fear opt-out. So we fear changing anything because we don't want to disrupt anything and possibly have anybody leave us. So we have to put those things out on the table. And we fear being Mr. Irrelevant. We fear that our content we're putting out there is not relevant. We don't know it. We have a gut feeling, and we're scared for that, and we don't know what to do with it. But we almost just keep doing what we're doing because that way at least we're passive and we can't get in trouble for trying something new, right? Or we don't know what to do or whatever. But there are strategies that we employ every day for all three of these. The fear of over-emailing, the fear of opt-outs, how can you handle that better, and also how can you get more people to opt in, which is even a better kind of program to drive. We're not driving nearly enough that in the association industry. We're so focused in on who's opting out, we're not focused on who's opting in or getting more people to opt in, right? So that's something to think about. We don't do enough analysis on the people who really are opening and reading and digesting, because that's who we should design for, right? Not the people who aren't. I don't know, we spend all this time on like, why don't they like us? Why aren't they renewing? Why aren't they registering? We're always going after this volume play instead of turning our attention to the quality play, which is let's spend our time focused in on people who actually are opening. What do we know about them, right? And what are the patterns that can bubble up to the surface? What do we know about the people who are opted in or who don't have a problem with receiving these emails, right? Why don't we focus into the people who are opted in but not opening? What else can we do with those guys, okay? And then from the fear of being irrelevant, that's when we have to take a hard look at our products and our services that we're marketing and our copy and things like that. Is it relevant to the user? So the email I'm going to send, is it relevant to the target user? Are they going to find it valuable? Okay? That's when it gets understanding our target market becomes really, really critical. Okay? And most of us, again, we probably, when we first brought email into our association, we didn't do it then, and we might not be doing it now, okay? Because it's different to say, great, I sent out a newsletter to 20,000 people, right? And that's what I usually hear. I sent out a newsletter to 20,000 people. And what I would say now is, do you have your demographic breakdown? And that's right about when people go, and the conversation stops because they're like, well, we have 20,000 people, and we service all these types of members, and we have different constituencies within there. And it's like, I know, but the demographic breakdown, the user profile breakdown of who's in that 20,000 is very important because that's the form function question, right? Baby boomers utilize content differently or email differently than Gen X, differently than Gen Y. Certainly it'll be different than the next generation, which is the centennials. So we need to know that. We need to know male, female. We need to know that breakdown. That is important for color. It's important that we know how we can employ color. We need to know if we know how many people are in mobile versus desktop. What are they using? What's their lifestyle like? Where are they going to be doing this? When are they usually consuming email? On what time? What day? Is that correlated to the actual time and day you send? Maybe that's part of your problem, right? If you on your schedule, you've been sending that newsletter at the first Tuesday of every month from time, because that's when you send your newsletter, but then you find out that people don't consume it until Friday, Why are you sending it on Tuesday? Because that's good for you, okay? That's good for you, the organization. That's not what dictates the strategy anymore. Remember, the you that we have to use is not the YOU, it's the you for user experience. So we have to say that. We have to say, okay, let's kind of rethink about the premises that you have been using all this time, and let's see if we can kind of do a deconstruct to reconstruct, right? We got to break to build. So what do we need to do that? The elements needed for improvement, and in there I'm going to say growth. Because in many times what we're finding, the work we're doing lately, is not so much like, it's not like email is new to you. We're talking about incrementally improving what you already have, optimizing programs that you already have. Sometimes growth sounds very scary to associations, but many of them do need to do lead gen. We need new members. We need to know how to grow through digital. How do we do that? Where does email fit into that? Certainly that's an area. But I think even a bigger area where you can get some real big gains and super fast impact for the business is thinking about it in terms of just email program improvement. Okay, we just need, just like you redesign your website so many years, we need to redesign our email program, and it's more than a template. Okay, hopefully we're convincing you of that today. So in order for me to do anything in terms of improvement or growth in the world, right, I've got to have certain elements that have to be the case or else it's never going to get done. And when you find out, okay, we talked to an association a year ago, and we talked to them again a year from now, and nothing has really changed, et cetera, it's because one of the elements for growth has not been in place. So let's see, what do we need to do to make any sort of change? This is like change management at the finest. In order to change and not just be operationally at steady state, we need these elements to be true, okay? We need, number one, we've got to have the time to think strategically. If the only thing I'm doing is operational every day and 8 hours a day is chock full of that, and every minute has been designed and driven by tactics, I cannot change. There is no room for improvement unless I tackle and I really invest additional time outside of the day job. So those are the two factors. Do you put in additional investment into the time of the business and ask people to, you know, stay longer, do more, or can you carve out time to do it? But unless there is carved out time dedicated to thinking strategically, right, change is not going to happen. Hence, one of the reasons that organizations and associations bring in agencies, especially for-profits are known for working with agencies. For associations, it's a little bit new. When they think agency, they're like, oh, that's the one woman we contract with to do the design work for our print magazine or our journal, you know, our conference brochure. The reason that for-profits use agencies all the time is it amplifies their ability to get change done, right? They can amplify that ability because they're busy. Most people aren't sitting around with the day job with like extra time in the day, right? As soon as you come into an employer, your day is full. But you need to have time to think strategically. So either get an agency, work with us, you know, or carve it out, but it's got to be a dedicated time to be able to step back from all the day-to-day tactics that pull you in 40 million directions and think strategically about this. Second is, you have to have a digestible, achievable plan. You might have a long kind of, you know, what's often called in like big term planning, a big, hairy, audacious goal like the BHAG, if you've ever gone through that kind of, or blue ocean strategy. Sure, you can have that long-term business goal, but you got to have a pragmatic, break it down, talk to me from a quarter by quarter, month by month, week by week, how are we going to get this done? And the organizations that are able to get change done have that type of actionable, digestible plan that allows them to take progress and make progress on a consistent basis. Third and fourth, I must have the right tools in place, and I got to have the right talent. Tools and talent are two areas where, again, why would I outsource? There you go. I might need amplified tools. I might need amplified talent. Maybe I bring it in-house at some point, but I need to jump ahead. How do I leapfrog ahead? How do I get there? I'm just going to outsource and amplify what I already have internally. Again, very new to associations. Associations are very typical in saying they're all do-it-yourselfers. We're in this do-it-yourself mentality. If we have to do something new, we better get a job rec out and hire somebody to do it. Okay, then let's say we do that. That takes months to hire. It takes months for somebody to come up to speed. I've just lost 8 to 12 months of progress. what organizations are doing is they're saying, let's fast track the growth, let's get there, let's just get the results there. How do we get to lead gen today? We get an agency. How do we get to getting a new overhauled email program? We get an agency. Get there. Maybe then you backtrack. You get the agency to help you build capacity, right? But get there first. When you have results in hand, a lot of things become easier. You don't have to have so hard to get the buy-in, to get the right tools, to get the right things. It allows it to be able to fast track to growth. That's how for-profits do it. That's how the agile world does it. That's kind of something that we're seeing associations pick up on to say, yeah, that's it. If we try to do it all ourselves, we can do it, of course. It's just a matter of the length of time that we have before we see results. So what do we do if we need to fast-track results? We're going to go ahead and pay in and hire it to get it done, okay? So those are the pieces. And then lastly, is probably my favorite, you must have the discipline to stick to the plan. That means you need really top-down buy-in. You've got to be able to say this is not some peripheral thing. This is strategically, fundamentally critical to the association business. And we're going to hit this thing, and we're going to do it hard, and we're going to do it right, and we're going to get there. We're going to get those results. So we need the discipline to stick to the plan. That's overcoming, that's the change management piece of overcoming, like, we've never done it this way before. We don't know how to do this. I'm not totally sure what you're talking about. We've never tried this. It's saying, let's get the plan in place, make it digestible, actionable, results-driven, and get there, right? And stick to it, and then adjust along the way. Iterate to the bigger goal. All right. The question, therefore, becomes, how do we free up time? And this right here is why we go back to this email type percentage time spent kind of chart that we usually do, because where the big time sucks are in red, which is the typical, I'm just giving you a typical kind of scenario, that's where organizations are trying to automate. Those are the key areas to say we have to free up time. Unless we're going to ask all of our staff to spend an extra, 2 hours a day at work, so, garnering us another 10 hours of manpower times 4, we get another 40 hours and get an extra week's worth of work into our association to invest to get ahead, which is probably not likely to happen. The next best thing is to say, why don't we automate and use human efficiency in order to, increase our human efficiency so they have the capacity again to think strategically and be able to improve. That's the one way I'm going to free it up. That's why we're seeing so much of the automation kind of conversation come to play. And the big time sucks typically are event marketing for annual, education, product marketing, and all the kind of member retention benefits, which I'm using to be like email content newsletters, right? Your big monthly newsletter, weekly, or however your organization chooses to do that if you're a big content focus as a member benefit. The question then becomes, great, I freed up some time, or we're in process of freeing up the time. Okay, so how and when do we grow, right? And again, that's back to the two-factor thing of I need more time and we need to grow and improve is given rise to this new kind of world order of automation and redesign of our email programs or our digital channels, which we're seeing all the time. So in order to do that, that brings us to great. Now we're ready to go. We have all those factors. We've set baseline. We're talking about this. It's time to look at how do we do a redesign approach using a digital business methodology. This is our trademark process, but this is, again, just highlights how we do it. We start with the business goals. We really investigate the target market, who we're talking to. We got to talk about the data, the sources, the tools, the metrics. What assets do you have? And how are we going to then we're talking about how do we send the email, how do we promote it, when do we send it, etc. But see, most of us skip to step 5 right off the bat. We're already even talking about our email sends and et cetera, and we've skipped 1 through 4. So what we do is we say, okay, let's take everything into account and let's put this methodology in place. And so the rest of our time together today, I'm actually going to give you a case study that we did for one of our clients because I want you to see how it all builds on itself, and it is form and function in action, right? And the end result, of course, is a new email template. But the end result, you can't just look at an email template, or how about this? It's like, why do you not just buy an email template off of some marketplace? I mean, you could. It could be great. Maybe it perfectly fits your business model and needs. But the likelihood is, if you're coming from that perspective, you're just looking for decoration to put around some content. That's what you're doing. You're decorating. Okay? That's different than strategically crafting a user experience-driven website or email template or blog or things like that. So that's the difference. It depends where you kind of are with your association, but at the end of the day, the byproduct for all this work we're talking about, sure, will be an email template. But I want you to understand the thought process that goes into it and why. Because the graphics that are chosen, the subject lines that are chosen, the format that's chosen, it's all dictated on what the form, what the function that we needed to have. The function of what it's supposed to achieve dictates the form it will finally result in. So let's talk through the case study. So we call the programs that we do for these, we call them Optimum 5 because we use we look at 5 different ways. You can see here our methodologies in 5. Our approach has a 5-step kind of place of how we view, again, this email program or email portfolio that we've been talking about. Okay, so let's talk about what we did for this particular client. And so what we first did is we do our research step. So our research methodology that we employed, we talked to the staff. Why? Because we need to understand the workflow processes. I will tell you something firsthand. So often when we come in, we find out one of the main issues of why it takes so long to get email done, et cetera, is because of some archaic process of how it's been set up just from a workflow standpoint, right? It could be that everybody sends their Word document copies to one person, and then that person has to take it out of Word and put it in the notepad and then resave it and then cut and paste it. And it's like if you just had the people tell you to just start with, just send in WordPad or send in PowerPoint, it would have solved, saved 10 hours to the person creating email. There's so many little weirdo glitches like that we uncover. It's unbelievable. Or like 3 directors ago required them to make a cost accounting for each email sent, and somebody's still doing that because nobody came to look at the process to say, we don't need to do that anymore. Okay? Or the reason that you're relying on, I don't know, your email service provider is because nobody just told you about Canva and how to resize the graphic. Like there's a lot of little details that can be just easily ameliorated with just some basic, I'd say, workflow process re-engineering. So we come in, we investigate that piece. We investigate again from the program level, what are you trying to do strategically in email, as well as the practitioner person to understand that. We look at the analysis of email deliverability. We run some tests on it. We look at anything we can to get out of it. We go through all of this stuff. We look at your past usage. We talk about the email types, the open rates, the click-throughs. We look at comparison to our benchmark clients, et cetera. So we do this kind of whole research step before we get there. And we also then look at areas that maybe we didn't employ that you're not using today, but if you were, it would be better, like actually interviewing some people who actually either don't receive email today or do, what they think. Developing persona analysis. Really looking at social media and web analytics. A lot of people say, let's just look at email. Email's not a bubble. The reason usually you send email is to get people to go somewhere else, okay? So typically, the premise is you're sending email to get them to return to your website, and you're using email as a website traffic driver. If that's the case, I better be able to look at your Google Analytics and see the correlation, right? Same thing with social media. If you're using social media to drive traffic to your website, then we need to say, okay, well, how does that hook together, right? Are you using social media to get people to come back and subscribe to your non-member email so they can see the benefits firsthand? They can, understand what the benefits would be if they were to become a member. All of those types of things. So we look at those pieces, and it's really important that you get someone who understands, again, not just email, it's digital. You've got to understand digital and, more importantly, how they all fit together. So we look at those pieces, and we are able to do that. For this client, when we did that, we found some really interesting things, okay? So when we looked at all that, we did all this type of research. The key findings for this client is this is what we found out. They thought, by the way, that their target market are deans of business schools, okay? And so they had an idea in their head, the staff did, of who they were emailing. And what's interesting about this case study is that pretty much everything that they thought did not actually turn out to be accurate when looked at it from a data perspective. When we got back our reports and we really looked and we investigated again, who are the people who are using and consuming your email, what does the data tell us? And the data told us that they are mobile first, that indeed that the majority were men, right? They had the demographics right on the gender and the age ranges, okay? But they didn't see this mobile first thing coming. They thought they were all sitting at their desktops consuming email. Not at all the case. Mobile first. They found out that they were mostly consuming during the weekends. Like during the weekends, probably we could extrapolate at Starbucks having coffee. But this was not what they expected. They're not looking at the stuff on a Tuesday when they were sending it at their desk. In fact, the target user is really, again, Saturday morning at 10 a.m., okay? We found that from the creative side, they didn't have compelling graphics or content that met with somebody who's on a Saturday morning using the content in kind of more of an entertaining self-improvement fashion, okay? The content style that they were using didn't have an email writing style. It was too dry. It was like too academic. And again, remember, now you have to picture this guy in a relaxed environment, trying to get an email, really wanting to kind of do a deep read on it and have some sort of enjoyment, because this is a self-investment process now for this individual, okay? So getting into the mindset of the user, which has nothing to do with the staff, two totally different pieces, right? The emails that the staff was putting out didn't have any voice to it. It didn't have any sort of style. There was no pizzazz. Like, it didn't have any panache. When they were talking and the email got to them, it was dry. It wasn't entertaining. It didn't give any value add. Like, there was nothing there that had any element of engagement or entertainment to it, okay? And the subject lines in the preview text that they had been using, they didn't have any, they weren't kind of email best practice for sure, and it didn't have anything in there that was compelling. Like, it was just so literal as to what was going to happen. It was, you know, like monthly newsletter from the organization, okay? Now, if everybody already has the expectation of what's really going to be in that email that's going to pop for them and it's going to be, then you can go with that, right? But if that's what you're trying to get them to open, that's probably not going to do it versus, let's say, a headline talking about another, let's say, dean of a business school who's just made some new improvement. That's going to go, oh, I want to know what he's doing, right? So the key findings right there is form and function were already off track. We're already off track. We're already blowing it. We're missing the mark because we didn't have the right target user in mind. We didn't understand the environment in which they're going to consume our email. We're not understanding the mindset of why they want to consume the email, right? And then even if they do open it, we're missing the mark because we're not giving them what they want. Okay, we're not doing this. We're missing the mark on form and function. We next looked at metrics because this is coming out, right? So everything we do, can't do it based on gut feeling. We're marketers. It's got to be based on data. So we said, okay, what are the key metrics that we found? So we found from a staff perspective, there's a huge reliance on vanity metrics. Vanity metrics are opening click-through, right? We didn't have conversion. So here's what we knew. We thought we knew our user. We thought we were sending out an email that fit them. And then the only thing we're looking at is open and click-through. So we're like, well, 30% of the people opened and, 6% click-through, right? And we thought, hey, we're doing a good job. But it was a false sense because, see, we didn't have the right questions in mind, all right? So we didn't have that. We didn't have any connection between our cost of goods sold, right, and the revenue. This client didn't have that. They were spending all this time doing looking at how much it cost per email and doing like a chargeback to the other business unit. But they actually didn't know how actually email drove any, like, that registration. There was zero connection there. So it's like, why are you spending all of your time focusing on how much it costs, but you don't have the other side about what you actually netted from that, okay? So if you have cost of goods sold, but you don't have resulting revenue, you only have one half of the equation, why even measure either one? Like, save the time and either do it all or don't do any of it. They also did, again, going back to the new concept of lifetime value, of the people opening it, right? Understanding, are they the right people? Are they the right people? Is it the target market that's going to grow with us? Is it the target market that they're going to retire in a year? Like, what's the lifetime value of the people who are actually opening this email? And then of the people opening the email, who's clicking, again, back over to the website to result in some sort of revenue activity, right? And again, everything in this association was down at kind of the individual email level. Everything was so tactical, nobody pulled back to say, wow, we're missing kind of the, the forest or the trees. So some of the other kind of key findings for them came out about their staff and the email skill and knowledge. The staff was doing the best they absolutely could, okay? But they didn't have kind of an overarching framework. They didn't have that plan for how to use it. So they're just tactically chipping away. Are they sending out email? Yes. Are there typos in the email? No. Is the email responsive? Yes. Are they getting it out on time? Yes. Are people opening it? Yes. So tactically, we have all of our check boxes, okay? But they're not making impact. And that's because from the staff skill perspective, it's gone beyond where they can go. They didn't have the right segmentation scheme about, again, knowing who to target. They didn't have the data to say who are the people we're trying to target, right? They didn't understand automation and inbound marketing and how to set up sequences or why you would do this or like how I would adjust to get lift. They're not understanding that. They don't have that type of training. Why would they? I mean, why would, unless have gone to, very specialized training, most organizations don't have that kind of know-how on staff at this point. I mean, HubSpot will tell you only 20% of marketers out there in the world have the right skill set to do any sort of marketing automation. Okay, so it's 80% don't. Okay, so it's not just in associations. Everyone, there's a massive skill set gap in those who really know how to do digital and marketing automation and grow through digital and those that don't. So we know there's a big skill gap there, so that's not surprising. Some of the other key findings we had before we get to kind of what the resulting template is that we saw that the staff was overwhelmed. They're not excited about email. It was a chore. Again, no shock to us. Low energy, it's a necessary evil. We have to do it. They're doing email plus 40 other things. The departments aren't aligned. There's a low level of really understanding how email works, so therefore there's a lot of like finger pointing and like, why didn't the board member get it? And it's the email provider's fault and not understanding how many skips there are in order to get email and the things that dictate getting into the inbox and things for that. So there's a lot of things like that, again, super typical findings. And then we also looked, again, the digital channel integration, right? So we didn't have a lot of like communicating. There weren't a lot of subscriber touch points. Like if I wanted, they had a non-member email, but there wasn't like a lot of ways to get to it and subscribe to it. It wasn't front and center. It's not like I was for-profit it was to it. You didn't have a mobile popping up. You don't have a Facebook sign up. There aren't these ways to like understand, again, how can I employ digital to get them back into my email world so I can continue to nurture them, because email is the most intimate channel. The whole goal was to get the email address so I can treat them in this wonderful manner. So I can entertain the gentleman who's reading my newsletter on Saturday at Starbucks at 10 a.m., okay? That's the whole reason I want to get the email address, and I want to get these different touch points and build what's called the digital footprint around them. So ultimately what we did in our recommendation is we gave them back all the data and the facts, and we said, look, this is actually your user. Here's your actual user, okay? And your actual user is on mobile. They're doing a deep dive. They're actually reading long format. They're not skimming. They're reading. You've got them. They want to read. They're at Starbucks. They're at 10 a.m. Their kids aren't bothering them. The wife's not there. It's just them and their venti latte, and they want to read. They're into it. They're into their career. This is self-improvement. They want to read what the other teams, the business schools are doing. So why don't you provide long format approach, but on a mobile-first device, right? So they're on tablets. Contextualize experience. Make it relevant to them, right? Find a way to invigorate the department. Find a way to make it personal, to have the element of entertainment, okay? So take everything we said today and put it into now the email template. Now, what should the design look like? What does that look like to be able to do this? And here's what we came up with. I know it's small, but I'm going to talk you through it. Number one, you're looking at the left-hand side is the desktop version, and desktop mobile version and tablet, I should say. And the right-hand side is really if I'm on a mobile phone and it's going responsive and I'm scrolling down. So, if you're on, let's say, your Samsung Galaxy, which tended to be what these gentlemen were on. So what we did was we then took all this data and we said, now let's get to the form. Let the function drive the form. So they had a great name for their newsletter. They came up with a newsletter name called Link. Okay, so right there we've got like a brand. I can start working with this brand called Link. The first thing we did is we put in a picture, up here an image, up close, up personal, what's called a BSI, a big sexy image, that they can switch out to be something that piques interest each month. It can become a thing. Like this month, we see this guy. Next month, it's a focus in on an up-close object or whatnot. But we put in a gentleman that's going to resonate immediately with the target user, okay? We put him up close so you can see their eye. You can see some of the wrinkles. You can see that they're in glasses. It's someone that resonates with them. It's somebody who looks like them. Right there, I've got relevancy. Then what we did is we made sure that the first article, the spotlight, is about one of their colleagues, somebody, again, like them. I'm resonating back to like them, and I'm pulling up the competitive nature of my end user. I'm interested in reading about not just how I can be a better dean, but what other people are doing that are good deans. And then I'm already engaged because I want to know how that guy gets to be Spotlight of the Week and how do I get to be Spotlight of the Week. I've already hit engagement. I've got their attention. Now I can set the precedent that each month we're going to focus on someone else or each week, and how can I be that guy? I want to know who's going to do it. I've hit into a natural tendency of humans to do that. Then I have a big area. After I gave them something, now the association has an area to say, here are the 4 things that we think you want to know. Okay? Here's content that's going to be interest to you based on your topics. And they have kind of 4 areas, and these all, again, you can see they go responsive, they go vertical, stacked, etc. Then we put in the banner ads because there's something, again, now we put that in between the content, and that's okay. That works better for our sponsor. It's targeted to these people. Everybody wins there. We have some other information, and we put in then a big kind of fun graphic of like each week we have a fun factoid. 36%. They've got a ton of content, ton of research. All we did was package it up in a different way that makes it actionable, interesting, entertaining, etc., and walks away and they say, you know, if nothing else, I got a new fun fact that sticks to say, I love that. I love that I'm a member of this organization. I always learn something every time I open that newsletter. And you can see the rest of them. The email is then talking about the icons for their different events, products, purchases, etc. Just those changes made a huge change in the overall organization. They launched Link, setting the expectations of a new member benefit designed for you. No surprise, because it resonated, these things fit, and they're putting it into a format that's for them, with content that's for them, that's packaged in a way that's written in a tone that's fun and engaging, and it's targeting the guy who's drinking Starbucks on a Saturday morning. Improved open click-through rates and prolonged improved open click-through rates. I have reinvigorated the brand integrity, and I'm delivering on the brand promise of what it is to be a member. Okay? It's interactive, and again, it's engaging, it's fun, it's entertaining. Now form and function have come together. That's the result of being able to step back and say, look, how can we look strategically at an email program and ultimately get to our email template, but do so in a way that we are solving digital business problems and helping the association actually move forward. That's all we have today. As I said, here's all my contact information. Feel free to contact me and try to get out that other on-demand webinar that has a lot of the other best practices on like the little tactical ideas that I think everyone will benefit from. But thank you very much for joining me. Trevor, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks. On behalf of Asae, I would like to thank all of the attendees for joining us today. Before you shut down today, I ask that you please take a moment to fill out your survey. Asae does appreciate your feedback in order to help improve future webinars. Again, thank you for joining. We hope you have a wonderful day.